Today on Locked On Phoenix Suns, we all feel better about the Suns, but they don't play themselves, and they don't play last year's version of the Suns. They play the other top teams in the Western Conference, so we'll break down one big advantage that the Suns have against all the other best teams in the West. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we're back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Welcome in. I'm Brendon Kleen, a staff writer at Awful Announcing and a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 7 seasons. That's Ben Garcia, the executive producer of The Drive on Fox Sports 9:10 a.m. here in the Valley. Thank you for making us your first listen to round out your week. Friday the 13th, kind of a weird one. We are here for you every single day. Hit follow or subscribe if you haven't already. You'll get a new episode starting next week, daily, where you can really become an everydayer. Start your day off with this show and get locked onto the Phoenix Suns. It's as simple as that, and we're very excited for it. Today's episode brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. You got about a week left of that offer, so don't miss it. We'll talk more about FanDuel later in the show. But let's start off, Ben, right here with the Nuggets. I'm sorry to the people. I've started with this advantage idea with the 3 teams that have eliminated the Suns the past 3 seasons in the playoffs. It's where we got to go. It's the teams that they got to overcome. So when I ask you what is the Suns' biggest advantage over the Nuggets, what's your answer?
Yeah, this is going to sound crazy because it does, but it's happened too many times at this point where we have to just live with it and take the facts for what it is. Yusuf Nurkic is the biggest advantage for the Phoenix Suns every time they play the Nuggets. I don't know what it is with Yusuf Nurkic. For some reason, I actually had the stats and I realized I didn't pull it out in front of me, but he holds Nikola Jokic to, yes, still a good game because that's Nikola Jokic, but either he makes him exceedingly work for it or he just has a bad game. Last year, I remember specifically the 2 games towards the end of the season where the Suns played the Denver Nuggets, one at Ball Arena. I think both were at Ball Arena, actually. And we were talking about Yusuf Nurkic in the first game, basically neutralizing Nikola Jokic. He wasn't even a good passer in that game. Neutralized him. And then you had where everyone was just like, it's a fluke. And even I bought into it. I was like, it's kind of just a fluke. And then you go back to it in later years. And then you go back to it again a month later. Yusuf Nurkic, for some reason, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because when Nurk was younger, they just picked Nikola Jokic over him, which, by the way, really good decision. But there seems like there's just a vendetta there with Nikola Jokic and Yusuf Nurkic where he got shipped off to Portland. They kept Nikola Jokic with the Denver Nuggets, which, again, right decision. But I don't know what it is. No other team. Anthony Davis can't slow down Nikola Jokic for some reason. And Nurk isn't necessarily seen as a defensive guy. But there's just an extra gear to that guy every single time they play the Nuggets. I struggled between depth and Yusuf Nurkic, but it's every time, man. It's every time. Am I crazy or does everyone else feel this way too?
No, I think the track record speaks for itself. I watched that game from a hotel, an Airbnb in Anaheim when I was in town for Disneyland. That was the first matchup between them. So that's a very vivid memory. And you were absolutely right about how that game went. You're not crazy. I had depth in parentheses as a secondary option. I'll give you mine in a second. We'll also hit the Wolves and Mavs and Thunder here as we roll. But my only question is, do we really believe that would hold up over 7 games? If we're talking about beating this team when it really matters, you're going to take Jokic. He's going to figure it out, right? I mean, this guy, I would bet on him not having a kryptonite, let alone Nurkic being the kryptonite.
Okay, so I've thought about that too. I've absolutely thought about, is it going to hold up over 7 games? And here's my argument to that. It doesn't need to. It just needs to hold over enough. Like, Nuggets can still win 3 games.
Yep.
And do I think, and because the evidence is just in front of me as I'm struggling to pull up the stats in front of me that I had earlier. Nikola Jokic, again, I don't know what it is. Can he be neutralized? Like even in the Suns series 2 years ago in 2021 or whatever it was, 3 years ago when they swept them.
Yeah.
DeAndre Ayton basically played Nikola Jokic to a draw. Can Yusuf Nurkic play Nikola Jokic to half of what Nikola Jokic is? Like, and at that point, like I do believe that. I don't think it's going to hold over for every single game. I don't think they're going to sweep them.
Yeah.
But can he make it more difficult on it?
I think that it would be maybe even less than 4 out of 7. Maybe you're talking like a handful of plays in those 4 games, right? And that is often the difference. So it's nice to have. And if we've seen anything, it is that bigger. If you're going to defend him with a center, now some teams put like a power forward on him and have the center be a rim protector, as we've seen with like Rui Hachimura, PJ Tucker, on down the line. If you're going to defend him with the center, which the Suns kind of have to, they're not going to put Kevin Durant on him, then you want a huge center, and the Suns have that. So they're at a good point there. They have 2 of those now, by the way, who also played, Mason Plumlee also played with Jokic, so maybe they're onto something. All right, mine was perimeter scoring. We'll spend a little less time on this one, and I'll jump to the Wolves here, but it sounds insane, right? That the Suns have an advantage regarding anything on the offensive end against the Nuggets, who have maybe the best offensive player in the history of basketball in terms of the floor and ceiling that he gives his teams. He's a point guard in a center's body. But I said perimeter for a reason. And Jamal Murray has frankly just had an awful 2024. He just got a nice little contract for it. We'll see how that goes. Kind of doesn't matter when you're talking about the playoffs and this season. But what does matter is last year in the postseason, in the Olympics for Canada, he has just not been good. Like, not good for any standard, let alone an all-star, top 2 on a championship team type of level. They also have lost some of their shooting with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and they don't really have anything else besides those guys. They never really have. It's been very contingent on those 2 superstars and a team that plays off of them at a really high level. A lot of those ingredients are in question right now. Enter Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal. I kind of feel better about that structure. Again, September 12th. I'm not saying that'll last, but right now, I think the Suns could rain threes on the Nuggets, something they historically haven't done, and everything just isolation-wise and creating-wise that the big 3 obviously can do. Okay, Wolves here. We got to jump to the Wolves. Floor spacing. It's similar. The Suns fell apart last year offensively for a lot of reasons against the Wolves in the playoffs, but I think maybe no more reason than they just stopped shooting threes. And the trickle down of that is obvious. You're fighting. If the other team makes a 3 and all you can muster up is a bad 2, you're going to lose that battle. And of course, it condenses the floor, closes off the floor for even getting the highest quality 2s. So I know that sounds crazy to say coming off of a series where that just happened, but the Suns do still have that advantage. They added even more shooting in the offseason. And the Wolves, I will believe it when I see it when you tell me they stay as hot as they were at times this past playoffs. Again, their history of all their players doesn't tell me that's going to happen. And I still feel like if I'm the Suns, I enter a series with the Wolves thinking, if we can put up more threes in this team, we're going to win more often than not because we'll make them.
Yeah, you saw that in the previous 3 games, which just, by the way, your Nuggets take that I was going to say as well is just really quickly, you are 1000% right. That Nuggets team is not going to be as good on the perimeter. And that kind of leads me to the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Phoenix Suns, and you had just kind of mentioned this as well, so I'll just kind of go in a different direction. They just have better shot creators. They're, aside from Anthony Edwards, and it really depends how Cat is feeling and if he's not in foul trouble, which Cat might commit the stupidest fouls out of everyone in the NBA. It's worse than even DeAndre Ayton at times. The Phoenix Suns just have better shot creators. And for some reason, those guys just went cold. Maybe it's Jaden McDaniels. Maybe it's Anthony Edwards. But you mentioned it as well. Pound for pound, the Minnesota Timberwolves do not touch the Phoenix Suns in shot creation and especially at the three-point line. They just don't. And you said it as well. The Timberwolves series remind me way too much of the 2022 Mavericks series, where the Mavericks were just hitting every single shot. There's a reason why they lost in 5 games to the Warriors. Luka was awesome, sure, but the rest of that team got insanely hot. And that's exactly what happened with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Anthony Edwards, the very next series against the Denver Nuggets, was a shell of himself. So shot creation for me, absolutely the number one thing the Suns have over the Timberwolves.
I know it sounds like copium a little bit and me just maybe convincing myself of this. Maybe just the passage of time has made me higher on the whole thing than I should be. But I really think that even though it was a pretty ugly sweep, the Suns beat themselves against the Wolves.
Oh, yeah.
And you just look, even from Minnesota's standpoint last year, if you go back and look at those box scores, we might have this impression Anthony Edwards was just a god all of a sudden. And guys like Jaden McDaniels were just, hitting everything in sight, or their defense locked down. There's really not a lot of clear trends that you would point to on the Wolves side of, oh, that thing that they did is why they won. You see it on the Suns side. And if they can fix those things, one of which is, again, the floor spacing side of it, I think that they'll be in a lot better position to have a competitive series with the Wolves. All right, let's jump to the Mavs and the Thunder coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network and America's #1 sportsbook. We have a little something different for you going on this month. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. And if that's not enough, be sure to check out FanDuel's Profit Boost in the app and use it for FanDuel's double your winnings for all of Sunday the 15th. Profit Boost will be live starting Thursday, so it'll be active when you're listening. Then you view your account page to learn more about the boost, get started there, and watch those earnings come in. Visit FanDuel.com, download America's #1 sportsbook, and get started. All right, Ben, let's keep it rolling. What is the biggest advantage that the Suns have over the Dallas Mavericks?
Yeah, I think immediately, and this is where I am going to stick to this one because I think it is so clear. It's 3-point shooting. It's the perimeter shot making of the Phoenix Suns. What happened to the Dallas Mavericks in the finals when Derrick Jones Jr. and PJ Washington were not hitting their threes from the corner? That's why they beat the Thunder. Oftentimes, PJ Washington and Derrick Jones Jr. got hot from the corner. When those guys went cold, they had virtually no one that could hit a shot outside of Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. And not only that, their defense isn't necessarily that stout anymore with Derrick Jones Jr., which is kind of a secondary thing to me. So if the Suns and Mavericks matched up, I know I'm crazy. I get it. I know I'm crazy. I believe the Phoenix Suns, if they matched up even with the Mavericks last year, I think they beat them. I think that would have been a very good matchup then. And I think it would have been, and I think it will be this year. I just think the Suns are better than them. I think pound for pound, you add Kevin Durant, they can add Kyrie Irving, awesome. I just think the Suns' 3-point shooting is going to rain way harder down on the Mavericks than it will on the Suns. And with the exit of Derrick Jones Jr., I think that's massive. I'm not so fond of the Klay Thompson thing because I think at times the guy's going to shoot himself off the court. That happened multiple times last year, as well as he used to be a dominant defensive player. Now he's a liability. So everything he's making on the offensive end, he's a liability on the defensive end. Is that crazy?
I think we see a lot of it the same way. I'm not fully ready to argue that the Suns would beat the Mavs. They did a couple times. They did one time in dominant fashion in the regular season, and they were close in the other game when Grayson had to guard Luka. KD guarding Luka, if you remember, and Grant Williams imploding and getting fouled, ejected with too many techs and going back and forth with Nurk. That was kind of the blueprint that other time for them to get that big win. I think that they became a pretty different team down the stretch of the season. Yes, Derrick Jones Jr. is gone. I'm still pretty scared of Dallas if I'm being honest. It is. They got Najee Marshall to replace him. And I think that they're betting that their offense needed to get better just maybe as much as their defense did, which is why the Klay thing is there. I just think that they have a level of size and intensity and physicality when they're at their best that really has always posed problems for the Suns. So the way that I went is balance. And I think that the games where the Suns have been able to beat the Mavs ever, even including that series where only Devin Booker remains, is taking advantage of the fact that, yes, they do not have an answer for Luka. They don't. They're not even close. They don't even have any. If you said one name of who on the Suns is an answer for Luka Doncic, it's a joke. They don't have one. But I can still envision a series where he has an inefficient 30, an inefficient 35, and 8 assists, but let's say 5 turnovers, and the Suns can win. And I think that this is one of those series where they're making their bet that, yeah, we lost to Giannis in 2021. We lost to Luka in 2022, and then Jokic in 2023. We don't have an individual player as good as any of those players. Still don't. But we got 3 of them now. And the sum of that is going to be too much for the other team to deal with. The Mavs still go as Luka and Kyrie go. There's no version of them winning a game unless those 2 guys are at the best of the best. The Suns can have an off night from Beal if Book and KD step up, and they can kind of make it work. So that's where I went with balance.
Just really quickly, how many other teams have someone that can guard Luka? How many? Is it 2?
Yeah, no, nobody.
Is it
Boston?
That's why I don't. Boston does.
Some other teams probably do. Yeah.
And Boston just had a lot of guys they could throw at him, and that's why they went and got Alex Caruso too, which I think is a little overblown because he's a lot smaller than Luka Doncic. But
I just Luka Garter.
Exactly. And that's kind of the biggest thing there that I was kind of looking at is no one has a Luka defense guy. But of course, since Game 7, Luka owns the Suns. That's the narrative that's thrown out there. Also, just briefly mentioned in that game where the Suns lost, where Kevin Durant went nuclear, Bradley Beal also didn't play in that game, so it wasn't a fully healthy Suns team.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Thunder. I'm going to be honest with you, Ben. The Thunder absolutely terrify me. No team owned the Suns last season more than Oklahoma City. If the Suns faced off even last year in the playoffs with Oklahoma City, I would have bet on the Suns losing. And going into this season, I don't see a lot of reason for that to change. Alex Caruso, you mentioned. They also have a center option now with Isaiah Hartenstein, and all their guys are better. All their guys are going to fit better, be more experienced, know their roles. They have a rotation clearly now versus last year. It was kind of who's going to step up. Josh Giddey's gone. They don't have to worry about adjusting for him. So the only thing I could come up with is experience. Suns are a veteran team, older team. I trust it. Late game situation, give me KD over Shea. That's the only speckle of something that I could come up with that makes me feel good about the Suns over the Thunder.
That is not a small thing. You are 1000% correct. That is exactly, I just have to agree with you on this one because I was going to say, if you'd asked me last year, I would have said the front court. They have no depth. Chet Holmgren weighs less than me somehow, and he's 7'3". Isaiah Hartenstein, let me push back on Isaiah Hartenstein just a little bit. Are we sure in a different culture, surrounded by a lot of guys who are skinny jeans and not exactly bouncers at a nightclub, that he's still going to be the same terrifying guy on the glass and the same defensive presence? I mean, it's a lot of money for a guy that kind of just popped last year. I think that has the chance to be one of the worst contracts in the NBA. Granted, it's the NBA. Everyone's got a mega deal.
Yeah.
But yeah,
also,
the front
fake third year on that contract. They can get out of it after 2. So yeah, I guess with Hartenstein, to me, it's like they don't have to use him, right? If they're playing in a series or a game where, yeah, they're going to lose on the glass when he's not out there. That's just a fact. Chet is small. Their power forward is Gilbert native J-Dub, who's like 6'6", but they can just beat you other ways. So there's going to be games where Hartenstein doesn't even have to close. But you agree with experience though?
Experience. We saw what happened last year. I mean, the Oklahoma City Thunder, they don't have enough closers. So you know what? I'll go with that aspect. The Suns, if we're just assuming the fourth quarter woes are not going to be so god-awful this year, what's going to be the advantage for the Suns, if it's not experience, it's closing. I would much rather have Devin Booker and Kevin Durant closing games in the last final minutes. They don't really have a guy that they can throw at Kevin Durant like the Dallas Mavericks might have with Derrick Jones Jr., like the Nuggets have with Aaron Gordon, like the Timberwolves have with Jaden McDaniels. Two of those guys were like made in a lab, basically, to guard Kevin Durant. They don't really have that guy. And also, I know Alex Caruso is a really good on-ball defender. He's not the biggest guy. If you're going to throw Alex Caruso at Devin Booker, I'm just going to take Devin Booker. Now, there are guys that I wouldn't say that to. Jaden McDaniels, even Anthony Edwards at times could really shut down and give Devin Booker a hard time. Alex Caruso's really great to throw at other teams. I don't think it specifically works out for the Suns, although I think it was an amazing trade. They completely fleeced the Chicago Bulls for Josh Giddey. But in the last closing minutes, and I'm adjusting here a little bit on the fly, I would absolutely rather have the Phoenix Suns. And these, listen, I know they blew out the Suns in the each time in the regular season. Do you know the Suns blew out every single time in the regular season? The Minnesota Timberwolves. It's just different, man. Game to game, it's different. It's not a back-to-back. I'd rather have the veteran championship pedigree guys, or at least been to a championship, Devin Booker. If I'm not mistaken, Grayson Allen might have been on that Bucks team. I don't necessarily remember from that one. But Kevin Durant, 2 championships.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just where it is. That's just where it lands for me. And I do think that matters a ton because that got exposed last year against the Mavericks. That in the front court.
Yeah, J-Dub it's a big season for him. It has to be him, right? That Jalen Williams is their number 2 in those moments. He was not good enough in the playoffs. He needs to round out his game. If that can happen, they answer that question. But I think you posing it is absolutely valid. And against a team like the Suns, I think Shea is just as good as any of the Suns closers, but they might have 3 of the top 4. Even Beal, you might take over their young guys.
Yeah, let me just ask you this. Their top 3 over in Oklahoma City, Chet Holmgren, J-Dub, and Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, or whoever you want to sub in for that third guy. Who would you rather have in just one playoff series this year? We're not talking about 10 years from now. Those 3 or our big 3?
You're putting me in a bad spot. You're making me the hater today, Ben.
I think
they're that good. No, I think,
goodness.
I mean, look, but it's not. It's the points that you and I posed about.
Okay.
The ways that the Suns' big 3 has an advantage, I stand by. But the game is played on both ends, and I just think that the versatility, the physicality, and the two-way ability of that big 3 is right there with the Suns. I'm being honest. But you mentioned with Dallas that no one has an answer for Luka. I mean, the list is pretty short of people who have an answer for Kevin Durant. If he can get back to even 2021 KD, forget pre-Achilles, even that Nets series, that Nets playoff run, if he can get back to that, there's not a lot of people who can guard him. And even the Thunder, they have all the wings in the world. I'm not positive that they have an answer for him. So it's not a landslide, but I just think OKC is just going to be so damn good. They could have a top 3 offense and defense this year.
Yeah, listen, in conclusion, you're going to take the guys that bark after interviews, and I'm just going to take the old guys, the guy that's won a championship, Devin Booker, who's taken a team to a finals, and Bradley Beal has had multiple 30-point scoring seasons. It's fine. You're going to take the barking young guys. I'm going to take the stifling vets, the blue-collar workers, if you will.
All right, Lakers, Grizzlies, Pelicans, we'll breeze through next. First, today's show brought to you by BetterHelp, making therapy easier, making it on your terms. Kids are always learning and growing, but as adults, sometimes we lose that curiosity. Whether it's gardening, a new language, bowling, therapy can help you reconnect with that sense of wonder, and your back-to-school era never has to end. Again, therapy and BetterHelp, they don't have to be for, oh my goodness, I just went through this major event in my life or this big change or this significant meltdown or anything like that. It can just be about learning how to cope, learning how to set boundaries, learning how to bring the best out of yourself. It's not just for trauma and those very negative things we think of. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's online, convenient, flexible, suited to your schedule. All you got to do to get started is fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA for 10% off your first month. All right, closing it out. We'll go through these a little quicker, Ben. I personally think the Suns have a little bit of a cushion up on the Lakers, Grizzlies, and Pelicans. And maybe you have one that you think deserves to be in here. I know some people might say the Kings. But if I'm starting with the Lakers, which will give a lot of satisfaction to a lot of Suns fans here, it's offensive firepower. Somehow a team that has D'Angelo Russell on it, and I mean, obviously LeBron's still there. Austin Reeves has been a breakout. They still never seem to have an elite offense. And I just see a lot of games where the Suns just have one more push in them. They win 125, 115 a lot of nights against this Lakers team in the playoffs, in the regular season, in the NBA Cup. They're in the same group again, whatever it is. I just think the Suns have a better offense than this team, and I don't really see a way that changes.
Yeah, I was going to say offense. I'll probably say that for one of the other guys. How about coaching? You want to tell me JJ Redick is going to step in and be a better head coach than Mike Budenholzer? No, I don't buy that. I don't buy a guy that has had zero head coaching experience. And I get it. He's really smart. A lot of smart players. I bet you if you talk to Steve Nash right now, who was kind of a bad head coach, you want to have him in a conversation, I bet you'd be just as smart as JJ. He just doesn't have a podcast. It's not me saying JJ Redick isn't smart. There's a difference between talking about it like you and I do and going on the court, making adjustments, not freaking out, and trying to figure out what you're going to do and calming your players down. Mike Budenholzer is a well-respected head coach who paid his dues, who was under Greg Popovich, who led the Hawks to one of their best seasons, then won a championship with the Bucks. Yeah, the coaching mismatch is lopsided, and I maybe I'm insane there, but I think it's very heavily skewed Mike Budenholzer.
Yeah, it is. I think if the Lakers could have had their druthers, that they would have probably skipped the whole Danny Hurley thing and the JJ Redick thing. And if they had just maybe gotten ahead of it and gotten Mike Budenholzer, probably would have been happier. So I agree 100%. I'm a little higher on JJ's ability to maybe do this than you are, but I just think coaching, frankly,
coaching's hard.
How much can it change this team? We kind of know what the Lakers are. They couldn't make their move this offseason. They've been waiting and waiting. Oh, they're not going to use their pick. They're going to save it. Well, they're still saving it. They still have the same roster they've had.
Well, they're going to go get Trae Young. They're going to go get Trae Young, and they're going to trade for. I'm pretty sure they're going to get Devin Booker in a year, and they're going to send us over Austin Reeves, and that'll be that.
So what's a great coach worth? Half a win, win and a half. So
well, it depends.
Even if they had Bud, right?
I think it's a coaching mismatch, though, and I think that's where it really weighs differently. Where I just believe the Suns are going to have that much more of a coaching help in a playoff 100%. Series if these two guys played. Now, Mike Budenholzer versus Chris Finch is kind of whatever, kind of a draw there. Now, Spoelstra, Steve Kerr, yeah, those guys are definitely worth a few more.
Yeah, and I think you're right to point out in the postseason, especially Redick would be probably even more exposed. I mean, any coach's first playoff run is ugly, but especially a first-time head coach, period, that's just tough. All right, Grizzlies. I had individual scoring. Same thing that you said for the Wolves. I just think the Grizzlies, I actually do really believe in them. I think that they're going to be a team we are talking about a lot. We forgot very quickly about how good they are when they're healthy in the regular season. I see no reason to believe they won't be this year. Ja has had all the time in the world to recover. Maybe there's some rust, but that is a really loaded top three and a deep team, and they're good, but they've still never been better than average on offense. So I'm going individual scoring.
1,000%. I agree with you. I'll just change up a little bit here. The Suns are a playoff team and the Grizzlies are not. Ja Morant is the enigma of what the stereotypical high-flying player that I told you my very first podcast with you that I love, but I understand you can't win a championship with him. If the guy can't score, and if he's doing, look at Derrick Rose. I know we all love Derrick Rose, but there's a reason why it didn't work out, because these big guys, these little guys who can jump 50 feet in the air are dunking, are crashing down to the ground. It's a long way to the ground. There's a reason why Ja Morant's always injured in the postseason. You can't do that. There's a reason why you let high flyers do that. And that's why I just think the Suns are just better equipped for the postseason. There's a reason why the Grizzlies are the Kings of 2 years ago. Really fun regular season team, high flying. They need to get a real number one. I don't think Ja's a number one guy. I think he's a number two guy. And he's got to develop a more consistent jump shot because it's just not there right now. And that doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Look at Russell Westbrook. I love the guy. It doesn't work. Derrick Rose. It doesn't work. John Morant. It doesn't work. These hyper athletic little guys, you got to develop a shot because not only they're going to clog up the lane, you're going to be injured by the postseason. We saw that Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook got injured multiple times with Kevin Durant. Derrick Rose, terrible story. John Morant can't stay healthy. Like, that's what happens. You got to be able to shoot if you're a small guy or play insane defense.
Yeah, you say they're the Kings of a couple of years ago. I think they're the Grizzlies of a couple of years ago, right? They just have never been able to get off the hump, up over the hump there. Okay. Pelicans, this is more of a New Orleans-centric one that's very obvious, but it just so happens that it's one of the only teams we can say this about when it comes to the Suns, who are also a small team, and it is that the Suns' advantage over the Pelicans is size. It's like the one team they're bigger than. Like, yeah, maybe they don't have, like we were kind of saying with Luka, they may not have an answer for the most locked-in freight train version of Zion Williamson. Nobody really does. But the Pelicans, last I checked, still don't have a center. They have a tweener guard as still their point guard in CJ McCollum, who had a very poor series against the Suns 2 years ago. And
locked up.
Yeah. And
he was locked up.
They don't really have like a traditional power forward either because of Zion's tweenerness, if we'll call it that. So Nurkic, even KD, even if Beal and Booker can kind of get going downhill, there's no rim protection. This team is undersized. It's the one team in the league maybe that the Suns are bigger than, and I'm going to flex that all I can.
Yes. You forget that Jonas Valanciunas isn't even there anymore. It's the whole.
He's a wizard, baby, getting his bag.
I couldn't have told you what team Jonas Valanciunas was on if you would have told me. I totally forgot he went to the Wizards. But yeah, it's the size. I mean, it's everything. I seriously, outside of maybe coaching, because I'm a really big fan of their head coach, who obviously is the assistant under Monty Williams for super long and Willie Green. But that team was one of those teams was really on the up and up, right? And they were supposed to explode 2 years ago, and they just never did. I don't know anything that the Suns are not better than them at, but at this point, I would just say offense. Defensively, I guess I'd call it a scratch, but every form of offense, maybe they're a little bit more physical than the Suns, maybe, but with Jonas Valanciunas gone, and who knows what Brandon Ingram's going to do, this Suns team is all factors offensively. They're just much better than them. Much better.
Similar question to what I asked you about what we've been asking each other about all these other guys. The version of Zion that we saw toward the end of last season, including against the Suns and maybe his best regular season game ever, and in that play-in game where, yes, he did get hurt. Let's set that aside. He's probably better than the Suns' best player if he's playing like that, right?
Yeah, but he's never going to do that. He's never going to do it on a consistent enough basis. If you're still in on Zion Williamson, I don't know what else you have to see. The guy's clearly, it just seems like he doesn't seem like he loves basketball. What's that?
There's a glare because of my ceiling fan, but that picture, hold on, where is it? Right there.
The one with the ceiling fan on it?
That's Zion. It's a painting of Zion. I'm a believer.
You're still bought in?
To be fair, I bought that 5 years ago, but I am still in.
I mean, I was too. I was all in when the Suns had a chance to get Zion, obviously in the draft lottery, but of course, I think they ended up with like the 4th pick again. I don't even remember. It was because I was like Zion Williamson or John Morant, and neither of those happened. I can't even remember who they got. But that Suns team, that Pelicans team, and especially Zion Williamson, man, if you can't get your weight under control, I'm just out. I'm in any sport. I mean, Eddie Lacy on the Seattle Seahawks. I'm sorry, whoever it was, the Packers for years. Couldn't get his weight right. I'm out. If you can't get your weight right in any sport where you're getting paid millions of dollars to do so, you just don't care enough to become what you could be, which is one of the all-time greats. I'm out on Zion, man. I'm out.
Fair enough.
If you could have convinced me at the trade deadline. Right? When he's like, I think it was his rookie season, he was like historically good for like 20 games. And then the guy, the jumper is fine. Everything else, he's a super freak. Like, yeah, at peak of power Zion, which he had in that one game where he dunked the ball and at the end of the game, and literally the Pelicans have been paying for it ever since against Devin Booker. Outside of that, Zion doesn't scare me. He's not going to hold up. Can't take care of his weight. He's brittle. Somehow he's brittle. And I just don't think the guy really likes basketball. Off the court drama, which I do think matters to how committed you are to the sport. And yeah, I'm so out on Zion. The Pelicans are a real fall from grace.
We'll see. I have to admit, I started my NBA coverage career blogging for like pennies on the Pelicans. It was like the first place I could get in back when AD and Drew were on the team. So I do have a little bit
really?
of
How long ago was that?
Soft spot. I was in college. It was like 2016, something like that. So I do have that, but I think the Suns are better. I mean, let's keep it real. But I believe a little bit more than you do. All right, that'll wrap us up. One advantage the Suns have over every team. There's at least one. Doesn't that feel good? Doesn't it feel a little nicer to know they're not hopeless against everybody? And this actually can work out. Yeah, we could have done 2. That would have been a weird title and a weird premise. 2 advantages the Suns have against every team. It would have been kind of odd. We're back next week, and we will be daily. So what are you doing? Hit the button. Follow, subscribe. Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you are. We'll be here 5 times next week, every day, every morning, with our season preview series. A question a day for 3 weeks to get you ready for the Suns season, get you ready for media day, training camp, everything that's coming up soon. We're very excited. Ben's been hyping it up all week, and we'll see you guys next week.